Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
So, Hare Krishna, everyone. I welcome you all for this new series, the Gita Essence series. And thank you for registering and joining the course. Today is our first session, so before we'll begin, I will just give a quick introduction to our speaker, His Grace Madan Sundar Prabhu. Many of you might be knowing him, but for the majority of the audience, for everyone's interest, I'll just give a quick brief of him. So, His Grace Madan Sundar Prabhu holds a master degree in electrical and computer engineering from Ohio State University, USA. After completing the degree, he worked in USA in Juniper Networks as a research engineer. and not only work, but he also excelled in his work. He received the Employee Excellency Award in 2011. Later on, he, inspired by the message of Bhagavad-Gita and the life of Srila Prabhupada, ISKCON's founder, Acharya, then he returned back in 2012 and joined ISKCON as a full-time student of Vedic arts and science. With the encouragement from his teachers, mentors, friends, he started the Corporate Education and Empowerment Forum called Evolve, Sublime Living and High Thinking, the motto of it. He conducted multiple sessions at the various corporates like Tata Teleservices, Persistent, Accenture, Sterling Healthcare, Lumex Industries, Symbiosis Institute, etc. His goal is to bring mindfulness into the workplace and increase self-awareness amongst the people and promote positive thinking. Under the banner of Evolve, he conducts regular cultural and educational events for corporates, teachers, and students. Specifically, the lifestyle management, the mind management, and themes of Mahabharata are the most sought after courses and are highly appreciated by all. Not only for the corporate students and the professionals, as under the banner of Evolve, there are educare sessions that are being conducted for kids, and Prabhuji is taking the online classes for the kids where the story-based, you can say the scriptures like Ramayana, Mahabharata are being narrated to the kids, and along with that we have like many of you are aware of that, we have conducted online competition, the painting competition couple of months back, and during the Janmashtami last month we have conducted several competitions like painting, bhajan competition, essay, and Manohar Leela, etc. So those are the activities that are being conducted as part of Evolve, where everyone from child to the adults, everyone are engaged. So I'll not take much time, and I'll now pass it on to His Grace Madan Sundar Prabhu to begin the session and welcome you all for this new session, the Gita Essence. Over to you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Okay, yeah, thank you. Hare Krishna, thank you, God Prabhu. And thanks to each one of you for joining us for this live session on Bhagavad-Gita as it is. So we'll begin our session. Is sound and everything okay at my side, God Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, so we'll offer I believe you might have to make me a co-host so I can manage it.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yes, now I see that. Okay, great. And fine. So we'll offer a quick prayer and then we'll start for our today's discussion. Also, we'll give you an introduction about this whole course. What is this course about? Now, this is an online forum. Of course, because of COVID scenario, some of us have got used to doing this kind of programs online for the last 5 months. But this is not the best thing. We prefer to do it because most of you probably I will not get to see. Probably I don't know where you are from. Maybe we can find out some way of interaction. So for this course, for this particular program, to have an interaction, because we have 1 hour, we have fixed it, and it's a little lesser time to discuss about Bhagavad Gita, cover 1 chapter. So during the course of a discussion, I may have some polls for you to say yes or no, so we can have interaction that way. So I'll request all of you to do take part in it. And any questions, any comments, you can hold on to it, and we'll have time at the end of the session. I'll introduce you with the whole how we're going to conduct this program in a short while. Let me offer prayers to our teachers and also to Supreme Lord, seeking his blessings, and their blessings we can speak something about Bhagavad-Gita. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatade Shatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we heartily welcome each one of you for this Gita Essence course, which would be an overview of Bhagavad Gita. So let me just tell you how this course will be conducted. So for this course of Bhagavad Gita, we'll have 18 plus 3 sessions, review session, which means there are 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita. So I'll try my best, although it's still difficult, but we'll try our best to give you the summary. We are not going to go into details. We're going to give you the summary and focus on one or two key important points from that particular chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So there'll be 18 sessions dedicated for that. And Bhagavad Gita is divided into 3 parts. First 6 chapters, the next 6 chapters from 7 to 12, and the last 6 chapters, 13 from 18, which are categorized as karma section, karma yoga section, bhakti yoga section, and jnana yoga section. So whenever we would finish this first 6 chapters, the six chapters, 3 sets, after each of that, we'll have a one review session, which means we'll give you the summary of the whole last 6 chapters, just to recap. So that would be like that, we'll have total 21 sessions. So along with this, we'll have 2 sessions per week. That would be on a weekend, Saturday and Sunday. That's what maximum of you opted for. And we'll be concluding, if we go in this pace, we'll be concluding this Gita Essence course, which is a certificate course. We'll be concluding on November 14th, which is actually a very auspicious day. It's a day of Diwali. So I'm not sure we'll have a session on November 14th. We might have to have it on the next week or maybe on 15th, whatever way. Along with this, we'll have one weekly review or question answer session, primarily a question answer session, which will be on Thursday, same time, 7:30 to 8:30, but it's an optional. Our host, Gaurav Prabhu, would put a message, or Vishwakiran Prabhu. If any one of you, if they have a pending question, they want some clarification, they want to talk to me or discuss, so I'll come online on Thursday evening at the same time, which means 7:30. Along with that, you will have 2 quizzes to solve over a week, because every 2 sessions will be covering 2 chapters. Today is chapter 1, tomorrow chapter 2. And on Monday, we'll release the quizzes for chapter 1 and chapter 2. So you'll have to solve it before next Saturday. And after the successful completion of your course and the quizzes, we'll have certificates, of course, based on your participation, and as well as on your percentage. We'll discuss more about it later. And finally, a reference book is Srila Prabhupada, ISKCON founder Acharya. The commentary written by Srila Prabhupada, Bhagavad Gita as it is, would be a reference book for all of us. So if in case you have it, do read from that book for this series of discussion. So this whole subject matter that we are starting is based on the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder Acharya of ISKCON. So to begin with, I'll just take a quick break here because I just want to make sure the slides are not put in auto transition mode. 1 second, please. Okay, great. So that as a little recap the letter as a brief introduction to our course, let's start with our very first point of discussion in today's session, and that is what is Bhagavad Gita? And then we'll, after introducing Bhagavad Gita, we'll get into the subject matter of chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita, if I have to describe it precisely, I would say it this way: it's a classic conversation between Lord Shri Krishna and his devotee and dear friend Arjuna. Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter, verse number 3, Krishna says to Arjuna, Bhakto si me sakha cheti. Hey Arjuna, you are my dear devotee and a dear friend. This is a conversation between the Lord and his devotee Arjuna. This conversation, as most of you would be aware, took place around 5,000 years ago, where the great armies of Pandavas and Kauravas and their allies, which were in millions and millions of soldiers, had assembled together at a place called as Kurukshetra, which is approximately 2 to 3 hours, I believe, or 4 hours away from Delhi even today, where a great fratricidal war took place. Fratricidal war means war between brothers. It is also said that the war was between not only brothers, Pandavas and Kauravas, it is also described that this war was between divine and demoniac forces, where divine was represented by the side of Pandavas, headed by Yudhishthira Maharaj, and demonic side was represented by Kauravas, headed by Duryodhan. Metaphorically, which means, or which implies, the battle of Kurukshetra continues even today between the divine and demonic. Of course, the battle ended 5,000 years ago, but the same battle between the divine and demonic continues even today, but not in Kurukshetra. The battleground today is our own heart, where we all must have experienced a constant tug of war between the divine and demoniac voices within us, where we might have heard, voices sometime, one voice telling you, this is righteous, this is good, you should do it. And there's another voice telling you not to do it. Let's say you have taken a commitment and there is a one voice that tells you, you should keep up your commitment and promises. Another voice says, who cares? Nobody keeps their commitment. I'm also not going to do it. So just to have a little interaction, I'm just going to pull out the very first poll here. How many of you have experienced this kind of a situation with yourself? Or this kind of two voices arising within your heart. One tells you to follow the path of dharma, whereas other says, no, who cares about it? And if you can relate to it, the message of Bhagavad Gita would become very, very relevant. So let's just wait for a few seconds. Okay, continue polling the time. I'll continue with the session. So how does this message of the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita helps us today? And that's the reason we brought this simile or a comparison between the battle of Kurukshetra that happened 5,000 years ago and with our situation today. The wisdom of Bhagavad Gita strengthens the divine within us and helps us to win over our internal struggle. Thus, the message of Bhagavad Gita becomes critically important for the well-being of all human beings. As I said, the message of Bhagavad Gita strengthens the divine and helps us, gives us a conviction to follow the dharmic voice. And looks like all of you agree for that. And that's what the conclusion. All of us experience this constant battle within all of us. By the way, have you or any one of you or all of you, let's go for a quick second poll here. How do I start the second poll? How many of you have experienced or faced challenges with keeping commitments, acting righteously at all times? How many of you have faced difficulties? Yes or no with that? Take a quick poll just to have some interaction and get to know for all of you. And if you understand that, yes, we have faced challenges with, okay, I have not launched the poll only, sorry. I'm also getting used to it. I hope all of you can see the poll on your screen now. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where you feel, yes, I find it myself difficult, I find myself, in a situation where I can't keep up with my commitments and follow dharma at all times and situations, actually the message of Bhagavad Gita becomes very, very relevant. And that is what we're going to discuss through this series of Bhagavad Gita. Last but not the least, to conclude about what is Bhagavad Gita, a very important thing which unfortunately in today's time is misconstrued and misunderstood. And what is that? Um, this message of Bhagavad Gita is not a sectarian or a religious message. So I hope all of you would have seen the results. All of you agree you face the challenges. I'll take off this poll now from the screen. So yes, this message of Bhagavad Gita is not a sectarian or a religious conversation, which generally at large people consider it to be. They say Bhagavad Gita is a book of Hindus. Just for your information, 5,000 years ago, there were no Islam, there was no Christianity, there was no Judaism, there was no Buddhism. And in fact, at those times, nobody was called as Hindu also. At that point in time, when Lord Shri Krishna spoke message of Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, in whole of Bhagavad Gita, there is no reference of any religion. But yet there is a reference of one religion, which was the only religion up to the end of Dwapara Yuga, and that was Varnasrama Dharma. What is Varnasrama Dharma? It's a scientific division of society based on one's psychological and biological activities, and not according to one's birth. Yes, unfortunately, this Varnashram system of dharma today have degraded into a caste system, but this wasn't like this before. And because everyone worked according to its nature, they were trained according to their nature, they were given education according to their nature. Those who had inclination for Brahmanical activities, those who had inclination for politics, for administration, they were given Kshatriya training. Those who had business inclination, they were given Vaishya training. And those who liked to serve others, they were given Vaishya training. Everyone in those days, back at that time, when there was only one dharma, that is Varnashram Dharma, everyone was happy in their occupation. Nobody thought, oh, why did I study engineering? Why am I stuck in this IT job? I could have been happy in something else. So before I go ahead, let me just ask you the one more poll here, and then we'll launch our course. And this will be the third one. Okay, no, wait a second. This is not the one I was wanting to ask. 1 second, please. What's going on? Relaunch polling, okay. Yes.
Prabhu,
Okay,
you have to close it and then open the polling number 3.
Okay, you got it. So because now the Varnashram Dharma is not in vogue, nobody understands it. As I said, Varnashram Dharma was a scientific system of identifying your guna and karma and to train you, because of which everyone was happy in those days in their occupation. So here's my question to all of you. How many of you are wishing for a change in a job? How many of you think, wish I could do something else? I'm probably not meant for this. And that's the question for all of you here. And let's see what everyone replies. So in essence, Bhagavad Gita is the best self-help book, and it's a great adventurous journey in itself. Yes.
Prabhu, some disturbance coming.
Voice is cracking up.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just. You have to deal with the technological side. Okay, looks like Mexico.
Yeah, now it's good.
Gaurav, you can manage the poll results. You can show the results when it is done.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll continue the session where people have time to give their results. So in essence, as I was saying, Bhagavad Gita is the best self-help book. It's not only a spiritual, it doesn't only give you a spiritual wisdom, but it also teaches you how to live a happy life in your current situation, find meaning and purpose, and align you with ultimately the goal of life. With that, as a little background to what is Bhagavad Gita, let's begin with our first chapter for today, that is titled as, I can take this off. Chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita, titled as Observing the Armies. So it is said, and this the two different titles are given. At times, one is said observing the armies, which means Sanya Darshan, to see. And second name, which is given for this chapter, is also Arjun Vishad Yoga. Now, when there is a title for a chapter, it means it's a summary. It tells you something about this chapter. And this chapter one, I often have found many times people ignore this chapter thinking that Bhagavad Gita begins with chapter two. Why people consider like this? Because Lord Shri Krishna have not said even a single word. Lord Shri Krishna begins to speak from chapter 2. So people say, well, Bhagavad Gita is about the message of Lord Shri Krishna and it begins in chapter 2. So Bhagavad Gita begins in chapter 2. No. Chapter 1 is very, very important. And let's a little bit focus on this title, Observing the Armies, which means to see through a vision. Now, the vision here, observing, is not reflecting or is not indicating to our instrument called as eyes. It is indicating to our perceptions. Observing the armies, which means how do you observe the world? How do you look at the world? You look at the world based on your perceptions. Just like if there is a religious fanatic and he sees a person of another community, of another religion, although he's a human being who looks exactly identical to a person from his own religion, yet this religious fanatic would see him as an enemy. Yes or no? Although externally he looks like similarly as, he's a human, same as what human he has in own religion, but he finds that person or consider him to be an enemy. That's what the perception is meant. So this particular chapter indicates that the wrong perceptions, the wrong vision that Arjuna had while looking at the army. And because of wrong perception, Arjuna got into bewilderment. And similarly in our life, because we have not been trained properly in the subject matter and the science of life, we look at very narrow perspectives. We have been trained in a different ideologies. Just to give an example, Hitler, the villain of the Second World War, maybe hero for some. Let's take him as a villain for Second World War for this forum right now. The villain for the Second World War, this person, that person, how within a short span of time with this propaganda changed the mind and the perception of every German, where they began to think every Jew as the enemy. Whereas the Jew and the native Germans before the Second World War were neighbors, were friends, but because of the propaganda of Hitler, they became a stark enemy. What changed? Their perceptions. So as long as we have a material perception of life, which Arjuna had, which chapter 1 describes, it led Arjuna to bewilderment. So all of us, through our training in this world, through our education forum, school and college education, what we have only developed is a material perception of life, because of which we keep ending into bewilderment of life. Just like Arjuna would be into bewilderment. What is bewilderment? How we fall into it, I'll describe ahead when we discuss Arjuna's bewilderment. So rest of the Bhagavad Gita, beginning from chapter 2 up to chapter 18, is about correcting the perceptions, is fixing the errors in our worldviews. And that is why I personally feel Bhagavad Gita becomes a very, very exciting journey where Lord Shri Krishna offers a profound wisdom which none of us would have come across before ever in any study, in a coursework, in any school or college and whatnot. In fact, Lord Shri Krishna here in Bhagavad Gita offers us the essence of all Vedic knowledge. Vedaischa sarvar aham eva vedyo vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. 15th chapter, 15th verse, Krishna says that what I'm giving you is the essence of Vedic knowledge. And this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita from 2nd chapter to 18th chapter is primarily divided into 5 key subject matters. We can call it as a Gita matrix. And these 5 key subject matters are Ishwara, first, second, Jiva, third, Kala, fourth, Karma, and fifth, Prakriti. Unfortunately, no schools or colleges or teachers or discuss anything on these important topic, because of which everyone seems to be perplexed, bewildered, time and again confused about what they should be doing. Particularly in this major time of crisis and COVID crisis, I don't know, there is so much confusion about it. how it started, how it transmits, and whatnot, the whole world has become a mesh of confusion. So, with that, a little bit as a background and an introduction to chapter one, what is the meaning of title? Uh, because we are going chapter by chapter, I will be discussing about these themes, the five subject matter, as a discussion happens in a chapter. However, prior to Gita Essence course, we do another course called as Gita Wisdom course. If any one of you is eager to understand any of this subject matter, they can go on our YouTube channel and there is a playlist called Gita Wisdom where they will find five topics speaking about these five subjects elaborately. So let's begin with the very first verse of chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita. And it begins Dharma Kshetre Kuru Kshetre Samavita Yuyusava Mamaka Pandavas Chaiva Kim Akurvata Sanjaya. Now, this is a book, it's called as a divine song of Godhead. The another way of saying Bhagavad Gita in English. This is a book, this is the words of wisdom spoken by Lord Shri Krishna. And interestingly, this such important sacred book begins with what is the very first letter with which this Bhagavad Gita begins? It is not Dharma Kshetre, it is Dhritarashtra, the villain. So it's very interesting why Bhagavad Gita begins with Dhritarashtra Vacha. And let me give a little recap of what's happening here and what does Dhritarashtra means. Every single word, when we analyze, you can find a relevance of it in your own life. Of course, we will not have that opportunity here to do all that details, but we'll speak as we are introducing, we're building up a foundation. Let me give you some little bit details about it. Bhagavad Gita begins with Dhritarashtra Vacha, not Krishna Vacha, Bhagwan Vacha, Arjuna Vacha. Why? It has to be like this. What does the word Dhritarashtra means? Let's a little bit evaluate that. Dhrit means determined, and Rashtra, or determined, and also it means attached. Rashtra means to throne. So the Dhritarashtra, in a sense, represents any modern day politician. कुछ भी हो जाए गद्दी नहीं छोड़ूंगा, जान जाए but kursi na jaye. In other words, whatever happens, I'm not going to leave my seat. And that is what Dhritarashtra represents here. A person who is very, very attached to rule a kingdom is called or is known by the name of Dhritarashtra. And he was so attached that he was willing to pay any cost for it. He was willing to sacrifice his own 100 sons. He was willing to destroy everyone if he can remain the king. It was his obstinacy and deep-rooted material aspirations that led to this great fratricidal war at Kurukshetra. Not Krishna, not Yudhishthira Maharaj, not even Duryodhan that much. Because Duryodhan acted as a puppet to Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra acted like a mafia don, who while sitting in a Pakistan, in Lahore or Karachi, wherever Dawood Ibrahim is, and he passes on orders to his puppets in Bombay and where else to conduct or to perform criminal acts. Similarly, Dhritarashtra, while sitting in Hastinapur, had used Duryodhan as his puppet. Time and again, Bhishma, Vidura, everyone, Dronacharya, everyone told Dhritarashtra, you are the king. Not Duryodhan is a king, you are the king. You can give a decision, stop the war will be stopped. Return the kingdom back to Yudhishthira Maharaj. But Dhritarashtra always had, few excuses to give. We have been discussing Mahabharata details and where we describe all this thing. Where Dhritarashtra would often say, oh, what can I do? I love my son so much. I cannot, disown my son, and my son doesn't hear to me. He understands my weakness. And many times Dhritarashtra would otherwise blame destiny. What can I do? Destiny is all powerful. If it is already written in my destiny, if it is written in the destiny of my son to die, who am I to protect? Like that, Dhritarashtra used excuses to hide his own weakness, to hide his own disease, his own attachment, because of which this whole fratricidal war took place. So at this point of time, when this Dhritarashtra Vacha, when Dhritarashtra spoke to Sanjaya, it is the time when both the armies had assembled at Kurukshetra, and Vyasdev had blessed Sanjaya with a vision where he can see what is happening at Kurukshetra. So Dhritarashtra asked Sanjaya, Sanjaya, please explain to me. Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra, which is the bhumi of a dharma, where both the parties have assembled to fight. My son and the son of Pandu, what did they do? Kim Akurvata Sanjaya. What did they do while assembled there? It's very interesting. You know, the trash, of course, there are many references or indications to it, but let's put it this way. It's very interesting when Dhritarashtra asked this question to Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra asked, what did my sons and the sons of Pandu did? And Sanjaya chose to speak about the sons of Dhritarashtra first. Why? Our Acharya explained, because Sanjaya understood Dhritarashtra is so fearful. Dhritarashtra was worried. It's very interesting if you see Dhritarashtra said Dharma Kshetre. Why did Dhritarashtra said Dharma Kshetre? So it's described that Dhritarashtra said Dharma Kshetre because Dhritarashtra was worried because Kurukshetra was a land of religion. And plus Krishna was personally present there. Yudhishthira Maharaj was personally present, who's personification of Dharma. So Dhritarashtra was fearful. It should not happen that because of the influence of the place, my son's mind get influenced and he decides why to fight. Let us give the kingdom back to Yudhishthira Maharaj. So that was the weakness and that was the fear of Dhritarashtra, because of which he spoke the Dharma Kshetra Kurukshetra. And Sanjaya, understanding this fear and worry of Dhritarashtra, began to speak and describe first about Duryodhana's army and what did they do. And Sanjaya wanted to tell Dhritarashtra, hey Dhritarashtra, just like you will never change, you will never give up the throne, don't worry. Jaisa Baap, Vaisa Putra. Your son has also gone on you. He also is not going to change whatever happened. Just like you had been physically blind from your birth, your sons are blinded by greed, envy, and material desires. And like this, Bhagavad-Gita begins. So to help you understand the flow of discussion, to make it easy, and to help you remember the subject matter, we'll be giving acronym for each chapter. Chapter 1 has total 42 verses, and the acronym for this chapter is doubt. So at least along with the sessions, you can at least have some memory, some remembrance of what is being discussed in chapter. So this acronyms I have used from the writing of my senior elder godbrother, his guest Sadaput Prabhu, who lives in London. And he had written a book long ago where he had described his acronyms. So I have used most of the acronyms are based on what he had described. Some of the acronyms I have just tweaked for the purpose of our discussion. So doubt is the first acronym. The doubt is the acronym for this chapter 1. So let's begin with D. So you see the acronym. What is it? Acronym means is described, and ahead in the brackets are the verse numbers. So let's begin with the first D, where D stands for Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. And verse number 1 to verse number 12 describes the discussion of Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. So Bhagavad-Gita opens with Dhritarashtra Vacha, and then Sanjaya for verse number 2 to verse number 12 speaks what Duryodhana did. He describes the activities of Duryodhana. So in this set of verses, Duryodhana actions are described, where Duryodhana's diplomacy and his inner fear is described by Sanjaya to Dhritarashtra. Fear. Why fear? Isn't that interesting? Why would Duryodhana be fearful? If in case you're not aware of the details of the war of Kurukshetra, just to let you know, Pandavas had 7 Akshauhani Sena and Kauravas had 11, approximately double the size. Kauravas had warriors like Bhishma, Drona, Kripacharya, Ashwathama, those who were blessed to be immortals in one sense. They cannot be killed. They cannot be defeated. Now you tell me, how do you fight? Imagine you're going for a wrestling match, which is a face-to-face combat. And your other opponent, the enemy with whom you're going to fight, you can never defeat him. What does it imply? If you cannot defeat him, of course you will be defeated. So Pandavas have very limited chances of winning the war. Yet Duryodhana is fearful. That's totally amazing. Why Duryodhana is fearful and what it teaches us. So this chapter 1 will look more at lessons because it's a whole storyline. So what does this fear of Duryodhana teaches us? Despite having such a great army, having all the potential to win the war, yet Duryodhana is fearful. So what it teaches us, the lesson number 1 in our today's discussion. First, very important, material security and resources does not guarantee success and fearfulness. Interestingly, Duryodhana had both. He had all the material security in terms of support of Bhishma, Drona, Kripacharya, Ashwatthama, and also Karna, incredible fighters, and resources. He had a huge army. Despite that, Duryodhana was fearful. So the point is, if we think, if I can accomplish a lot of wealth, if I have all the resources, then I would become fearless. Well, that's not the point. Duryodhana wasn't. In fact, it is often seen that people who have more wealth, more possessions, to that degree, they are more afraid. Yes or no? A pauper sleeping on a street, what he has to lose? He doesn't have anything. But the more we acquired, the more expensive car we get. Let's put it more simpler. The more expensive smartphone you bring in. Remember those days when you used to use keypad mobile? Agar kho bhi gaya, no tension. But now smartphone, you get smartphone for 40,000, 50,000, whatnot. If it goes missing for 2 minutes, it looks like my child has disappeared. My beloved have been kidnapped or something. People become so much in anxiety. To the point we learned from this particular episode of Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra, from Duryodhana's fear, that be assured no material security and resources can ever guarantee any success of fearlessness. So question comes, if that's the case, what makes us fearlessness? Well, it's a subject matter worth pondering. When the individual, lesson 2, when the individual becomes self-centered, like Duryodhana, egoistic, and is primarily interested in selfish gain and personal aggrandizement, what happens? Fear, anxiety, and disappointment are inevitable. That was the situation of Dhritarashtra. Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra could not sleep for 13 years, although they were living in palace, had a silken robes to wear, had the best of the bed to sleep on, had the best of the food to eat. Yet they could not sleep peacefully, and Pandavas slept peacefully in the forest. Unfortunately, such an individual becomes oblivious to the ill effects of their own actions. They don't even understand that they're going wrong. For example, for his greed, he was willing to destroy the lives and families of millions of warriors who had assembled to fight in the war. Duryodhana knew what would be the consequences, but yet, if you look in the 18 days of war, time and again he was told, Duryodhana, please give up this idea of defeating Pandavas, not possible. After Bhishma's death, then after Drona's death, Dronacharya's death, time and again he was warned. Then after Karna's death, which happened on 17th day of the war, on 18th morning, Kripacharya spoke to him, tried telling Duryodhana, still it's time. Shalya also spoke to Duryodhana, still you have time. Please make peace with Yudhishthira. I promise you, Yudhishthira is such a great-hearted person. He will forgive you. Give his kingdom back, or else you lose your life, you lose each one of us, and you lose your Hastinapur also. You know what Duryodhana said? After his invincible warriors have been laid dead, Bhishma Pitama, Dronacharya, Karna, and he's lost most of his army. Yet Duryodhana said, no, I am going to fight. And that is what the meaning of is a self-centered, egoistic people are just worried about their own well-being, which leads to fear, anxiety, and disappointment. And as a result of his stubbornness, 60 crore warriors lost their life, which were husbands, sons, and fathers of so many other, the kids and the family members and whatnot. And we have also seen it over in recent history how one man led the whole world into Second World War, which means Hitler, for his own vested interest and destroyed millions of lives. It's a very important lesson. Not only the person destroys his own life, if in case for us that person is our relative or he's our elder or if he's our leader, then just like Duryodhan destroyed the lives of all his subordinates, Hitler destroyed whole Germany and the larger part of Europe. Similarly, one such person can cause such a great disturbance and chaos to the whole society. So, after describing Duryodhan's fear, Sanjay began to speak about Pandava's situation at the war, and that brings us to the second section of chapter 1, where O stands for ominous results. Ominous results means here Sanjay describes how Pandavas sounded their conch, they blew their conches. And when Pandavas blew their conches and the trumpets and the bugles, at the Kaurava's side, everyone got terrified. It is described the elephants sat down on their knees, the horses crashed on the ground, the soldiers who were standing on their feet because of the fear of the sound generated from the Pandavas' camp, they fell unconscious on the ground. And the warriors who were standing on the chariot, they had to hold the flag post to protect them, so they got so fearful. And that is what is being described by Sanjaya in verse number 13 to 20, where through this discussion, he also describes the signs of victory of Pandavas, through their different indications, just like the conch and the presence of Hanuman and all those things, details are given. So in this particular series of verses, the key theme is that Lord's protection is always there to his surrendered devotees. Because when Arjuna and Duryodhana had gone to Krishna at Dwarka to ask for their help, what did Lord Shri Krishna told to Arjuna and Duryodhana? I give you two options. You can either choose me without weapons, I'm not going to fight, or you can choose me you can choose my whole Narayani Sena, which is as powerful as I am. And Arjuna was asked to make the first call, and Arjuna chose Lord Shri Krishna, whereas Duryodhana was so happy and delighted to get the whole Narayani Sena. But look at it. Arjuna had everything. Arjuna has all the energies of the Lord, but not the Lord. But Pandavas have the Lord. Because Pandavas have Lord Shri Krishna by himself, all the Lord Shri Krishna is not going to participate in the war. Because Krishna was present, because Lord was present, there was fearlessness. There was no sign of hopelessness at Pandava's side, where Kauravas, despite having everything, were totally frightened and discouraged. So the point here is, regardless of whether the worldly odds seem stacked against the devotee, if a devotee or if a person is a devotee of Lord Shri Krishna, if a person has Krishna, has the grace of the Lord, then by no means he can be ever defeated or has any fear for his life or well-being. In other words, those who stand on the side of purity and righteousness are always victorious. Bhagavad-Gita concludes with Dhritarashtra asking Sanjaya, Sanjaya, what is your conclusion? You have also heard the message of Lord Shri Krishna to Arjuna, so what do you infer from it? And then Sanjaya said, yes, I heard it. And this is my conclusion, 18 chapter 78 verse, where Sanjay tells Dhritarashtra the conclusion of what he understood. And he says, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Yatra Partho Dhanurdara, Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhute Dhruva Nitir Matir Mamaha. Wherever Krishna and Arjuna are there, O Dhritarashtra, O blind man, O fool, listen carefully. The four things are present. There you get Shri, you get opulence, you get victory, Vijayo, you get Bhutir, all auspiciousness, and Dhruva Niti, there is morality, which means there is no hope for your sons to win the war. Yet Dhritarashtra did not call. That is called as determination. We need to actually glorify Dhritarashtra for something, despite all his bad habits. His determination was so strong. Everyone told him, but yet he did not deter. So Pandavas were fearless because Lord is by their side. And this section brings a very important lessons for all of us. Our faith on Lord Shri Krishna determines our degree of fearlessness. Our faith in Lord Shri Krishna determines our degree of fear. I was speaking about the same principle before to the session when I had Mahabharata session. I was explaining, we were discussing about this whole discussion between, Duryodhana and Arjuna approaching Lord Shri Krishna. When that whole thing had happened, Krishna asked Arjuna, Arjuna, why did you choose me? I'm not even going to fight. And Arjuna immediately said, my dear Lord, I don't care. What I care is you. If you are present, then there is always going to be auspiciousness. There is always going to be a victory. There is no reason for me to be fearful. And when Arjuna had chose Krishna, you know what Duryodhana was thinking? Ye Pandavas sare pagal hai. They don't know. These Pandavas are fools. Arjuna had an opportunity to get Narayani Sena, yet he lost that opportunity. And Duryodhana was thinking that he is intelligent. He was patting his back, thinking that, wow, how great I am. I got the Narayani Sena. And he was thinking Arjuna to be sentimental. But see, Duryodhana got Narayani Sena, but he's still fearful. Arjuna got a cowherd boy, Krishna, who is going to come on the battlefield, who's present on the battlefield without any weapons. And Pandavas are fearless. And that is what our faith, the power of faith, when we understand the subject matter of Ishwara, when we understand who Krishna is, when we develop our faith, by default, our fear goes away. And it depends on the degree of our surrender and faith on the Lord. Let's come to the third section of this chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is from verse number 21 to 27, titled as Uncertainty. Here Sanjay speaks that Arjuna, out of curiosity, ordered Krishna. Interesting, huh? Arjuna, Bhakta, is ordering Bhagavan. Bhakta is giving order to Bhagavan, and he says, my dear Lord, please drive the chariot to the middle of the battlefield, as I want to take a final look who all have assembled at the battlefield of Kurukshetra at the side of Duryodhana to fight against us. Now, interestingly, Bhagavad Gita introduces Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, as the controller and proprietor of everything. While Sanjay is describing Lord Shri Krishna, when he narrates Krishna's words, he doesn't call Krishna Uvacha. You will see in Bhagavad Gita ahead, he always says Bhagavan Uvacha. When it comes to Arjuna, when it comes to Dhritarashtra, it is described as Dhritarashtra Vacha, Sanjay Vacha. But Srila Vyasdev, who had written this, this is a part of Bhishma Parva in Mahabharata. So Srila Vyasdev does not call Krishna Vacha. Srila Vyasdev says Bhagavan Vacha. And what is the definition of Bhagavan? We're going to discuss ahead. But in Vishnu Puran, it is described Eshwarasya Samagrasya Virayasya Yashashashya Jnana Vairagyaschaiva Sanamhritangana. भगवान के 6 ऑपुलेंस होते हैं. ऐश्वर्या, opulences, ऐश्वर्य समग्रस्य, वीर, which means he is the most powerful. Yasha, he is the most famous person. Shriya, he is the most beautiful person. Jnana, he is the most knowledgeable person. And the last, Vairagya, he is the most renounced. And that Supreme Personality of Godhead had been instructed by Arjuna to drive his chariot. And that is what makes a key theme of this discussion, is that Lord loves to become a servant of his devotees. Lord loves to assist or serve his devotees. So when we say devotee and Lord, it's a relationship of servant and master. Servant is devotee, master is Krishna. But actually, this role is reciprocal also. Here, master is Arjuna and servant is Krishna. And this discussion brings out some very, very important message, which would help us to understand who is Ishwara. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is willing to accept a menial position for the pleasure of his devotees. He is not an autocratic ruler, which unfortunately is understood by many philosophers or described by many philosophers today. He is not an order supplier whose only job is to punish sinners or law violators. That is what an idea of Western religions, where they consider either be Judaism or Abrahamic faith, they consider Lord to be a dictator who punishes. No, that's not the idea of Bhagavad Gita or Vedic culture. Rather, the Lord is a person who loves to have relationship, who loves to have relationship in a Sakhya Bhav, in a parental mood, in a dasya, and different rasas are described. So Krishna, or Supreme Lord, engages in various loving exchanges with his dear devotees, and he descends in this world to attract our hearts to his loving pastimes. This point Krishna explains himself ahead. So here, Arjuna also teaches us a very vital lesson. Just like Krishna followed the order, brought us this very important message. Similarly, Arjuna also teaches us a very vital lesson. And this I want you to pay attention. It's very important for all of us. And what is that? A battlefield of war is about to begin. Yet Arjuna, understand the intensity of the situation. It's a very serious situation out there. Yet Arjuna took time to reflect. Arjuna said, wait, I want to see, I want to understand who have assembled here. Even in that time of crisis, Arjuna was not running around, banging the doors and saying, I have no time, I'm so busy, I have no time for nothing. But yet, Arjuna, understanding the gravity and the importance of the situation, still took a time to reflect. All of us should take this as a lesson from Arjuna's situation and take a clue from here, which means life may be crammed with responsibilities, which is the case for all of us. All of you are working, maybe students, and maybe pressed or may have pressing issues. But attendance to such demands should not be at the expense of quality spiritual introspection. We cannot just continue living our life saying that I'm too busy, I have a very hectic work life, but we should also take out time for the self growth, for the self cultivation, for the self realization, which begins with spiritual introspection. Unfortunately, the chronic disease of modern man is the excuse of no time when it comes to soul searching. It happens, I have interacted many times. You ask people, please attend Bhagavad-Gita, please read Bhagavad-Gita. You know what many times people say? Kya Prabhu? मरने का समय नहीं है, पढ़ने की बात कर रहे हो आप? People give different kind of excuses. But it's very, very important. That's a point here, a cue for all of us to take from Arjuna's pause in the battlefield. And that brings us to the fourth section of chapter 1, D-O-U-B. B stands for bewilderment, and there are 3 verses describing that. So when Arjuna saw, his elders standing in front of him, Arjuna could foresee, when he saw the huge army standing in front of him, Arjuna could foresee the imminent suffering or the impending suffering and the death that is about to happen because of the war, which is an inevitable consequence of war. And he began to reflect on his decision to fight. Should he fight or not? Just because we want a kingdom, because of us, there's going to be a massive massacre. Millions and millions of people will die, and that is what is being described here. And the key theme in this discussion here is illusion causes all problems in life arising due to bodily identification. In other words, at this stage, at this point of time, at the battlefield, Arjuna being bereft of a proper spiritual understanding or a spiritual vision. This is a point where Arjuna is looking from material vision. Observing the army, he's looking at the armies. So he's looking from a material vision, because of which he's getting into this idea there would be a loss of there is a loss of life, my relatives would be killed, there is my teacher, there is my great grandfather. So he became completely confused about it. So his uncertainty intensified and he became bewildered because of this material vision. And what is this material vision, which is also loosely described as bodily identification? Lord Shri Krishna would elaborate that in chapter 2 and rest of the Bhagavad-Gita. But this particular incident brings out an important lesson. And the symptoms or the characteristics of this material vision is aham mameti, which means me and mine. So this brings out a very important lesson or learning for all of us from this situation of Arjuna. When one lacks an understanding of one's spiritual identity Am I the body or the soul? His relationship with the Lord, who am I, who is Supreme Lord? And also, when the critical purpose, what is the aim of my life? What is the purpose of this world? One inevitably becomes disturbed and frustrated by life's challenges. Just like COVID crisis, this is a time where we can learn and grow, or maybe we can become disheartened and become pessimistic altogether. If we understand this is what is the reality of life, this is what happens when people perform sinful activities, understand the spiritual vision and see from that is a result of karmic reactions and activities that have happened. However, it is an opportunity for me to learn and grow and fulfill the purpose of my life that is given to me. Then a person will be optimistic and will maintain a positive outlook. For some of us, when we saw this uncertainty, we were not sure how we'll be able to connect with all of you. But this COVID crisis unfolded an incredible opportunity for us to interact with audiences. Trust me, if this was not COVID crisis, I would not be sitting with all of you, and you probably would not be listening to me, because I never give online sessions. We all give local sessions, local programs. That would have just never happened. Now, because of COVID crisis, although it's a crisis, but within that curse, there is a blessing. Where while sitting at home, you can connect with people all around the world, listen to them, and maybe take a time off, which you may have, because now you don't have to travel to office. That saves some time for you. Maybe utilize that time to cultivate some spiritual knowledge. And with that, we come to the last point, being disheartened and bewildered. Arjuna now begins to offer reasons for disengaging from the battle. And the last section stands for T, which means turning point. For 13 years, Pandavas waited for this day. Finally, it came. Arjuna prepared. Arjuna went and spent 5 years in Indraloka, learning the science and the knowledge of celestial weapons. So much they struggle, so much they work hard for this day. And now Arjuna says, "मैं fight नहीं करूँगा. I'm not going to fight." Hey, what does it mean? How can you not fight? You prepared for it. What is this? How did this happen? And that is what happens. And here Arjuna, being bewildered by the bodily identification or material vision, he begins to offer reasons. Let's quickly look at the reasons that he offered. First argument, compassion. I have given the verses number. You can read Prabhupada's book for more points on it, 27, 28 verse, where he says, "My dear Lord, it would be cruel and heartless for me to prematurely terminate the lives of so many soldiers." So he became compassionate. Now, as a Kshatriya, for him to fight in a religious war, for a Kshatriya, for him to die in a battle is considered glorious rather than to die due to an old age in his bed and in his palace. For a Kshatriya, it's a glory. For a Kshatriya, see, all of you might have known when Kshatriya would go for a war, they will also go with a lot of musical instrument. There will be a lot of music would be playing, drums, bugles, and whatnot. Because for Kshatriya, it was a moment of celebration. The war was a moment of celebration. So no Kshatriya would ever say, like what Arjuna is speaking, "Oh, how can I fight? People will die." Of course, fight means death. People are going to die. So Arjuna, have you not killed people before? Have you not fought on behalf of Indra? I have destroyed so many demons, so many demonic forces. Didn't you fought with the Kauravas at the end of the Virat Parva? Didn't you defeat them? Why suddenly Arjuna is speaking about it? Compassion. And that is the result of his material vision. Second, "My dear Lord, if I have to fight, we all fight here, everyone will die. With whom would we enjoy? We might get the kingdom. My brother may be sitting on the throne, but there won't be anyone in the whole world except for 5 of us." Our enjoyment increases when we have more people, isn't it? When we share happiness, happiness increases. So Arjuna said, "My dear Lord, with whom would we enjoy? There won't be anyone, no relatives, no near and dear ones." So like this, he gave the second reason. Third, "My dear Lord, what about sin? I would have to kill my Bhishma Pitama, great-grandfather, my teacher Dronacharya, my brothers. Because of this, I would accrue sinful reaction. Because of all this brutal violence, my dear Lord, I should not be engaging in this war." And the fourth, destruction of family traditions, where he said, Mighty Lord, because this wholesale killing involved in this war would destroy the family units, because all the men, Kshatriyas, which are the administrators, will die. Then the rogues and thieves will become the politicians, and then they will destroy the culture, they will destroy the family traditions, and it will cause great havoc for the future generations. So, like this, Arjuna offers four reasons not to fight in chapter one. And the last reason he describes in chapter two, which is indecision, which he says, My dear Lord, I don't know. I am not able to make the decision. My mind is switching back and forth. I don't know what is right. So, but I'm kind of convinced that I should not fight. So, but still he says, I don't know. You tell me what you want. And the seventh verse, he surrenders. Shishya Seham Sadimam Tvam Prapanam. We'll describe this more tomorrow. So, at this point of time, chapter one comes to a halt, a sudden halt, where Sanjay tells to Dhritarashtra, Hey Dhritarashtra, Arjuna's mind is overwhelmed by grief. He has taken off his Gandiva bow. He had kept it down and is collapsed on the chariot, crying with tears in his eyes and saying, My dear Lord, I cannot fight. And when Dhritarashtra heard this, he was in joy. He was in bliss. Because if Arjuna goes away, then Yudhishthira would walk away. Then Pandavas would walk away, the war would not happen, and Duryodhana would become the king. In other words, if Duryodhana is victorious, Dhritarashtra remains the king. But however, Sanjaya in chapter 2, verse number 1, immediately smashes the illusions of Dhritarashtra. So that's the homework for all of you. Please do read chapter 2, verse number 1 when we meet tomorrow. And Sanjay used some very particular words which actually destroys the illusion of Dhritarashtra that Arjuna is going to walk away. Krishna would not let it happen. And Arjuna is also not going to go away like that. So here chapter 1 comes to a conclusion to draw a lesson from the final aspect, because this is a very practical chapter. That's the reason we have a few lessons for all of you here. So if you look at Arjuna's situation, the Arjuna's bewilderment here and confusion of not performing his duty, his dharma, to either Duryodhana gives the rightful claim, that was a terms and condition or dice game, or else as a Kshatriya, they have no other recluse than to fight. But Arjuna is totally bewildered. Why? The effect, which is fear, loss of composure and decision, the effect which Arjuna had experienced was because of his self-interest, because of his material vision. Observing the armies, Sanya Darshan, that perspective, material perspective, led to the bewilderment of Arjuna. So here, let me take one final poll here before we call off the session for today, or second last. Just like Arjuna had experienced struggle with decision making, how many of us struggle with making decisions in our life? I don't know, my dear Lord, what should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? Both looks fantastic, but I'm more attached to this. Is it going to be rightful for me? What not? How many of us struggle with decision making? God, Prabhu, you can handle this publishing the result. I will conclude the session you had.
Yes,
So
Prabhu.
more or less, if you look at the result here, looks like all of us struggles with it. And as I said before, Bhagavad-Gita, the wisdom of Bhagavad-Gita is very relevant and practical, because it's going to strengthen our ability, sharpen our intelligence to understand and make right decisions. Last but not the least, most of you may think, well, I am not in Arjuna's situation. My life is all wonderful. I have no problem. I am not experiencing any crisis. So why should I study Bhagavad Gita now? Well, if you are thinking like that, so let me just tell this few points and conclude. We all know life is all about ups and downs. We all face various challenges in our life. With some we can deal easily, while others may have the potential to overwhelm us. Arjuna was overwhelmed and he could not decide what was best for him. And thus, out of frustration, he decided to quit. So maybe at this point of time, you may have some challenges or may not. Or maybe if you have challenges, they may not be overwhelming for you. but all of us would face challenges in our life which would overwhelm us. To give an example, sudden departure of our dear ones, a sudden job loss, or financial crisis. These are very overwhelming experiences. These are not easy to handle. Somebody getting, rather than getting a first rank, gets a second rank is still okay. But those who are somebody who was supposed to get a rank or pass an exam but fails is a difficult situation. So all of us come across this difficult situation time and again. So we should not disregard this very important message of Bhagavad Gita, thinking that it is not meant for me today because I don't face it. Often it is seen that when an individual is faced with an overwhelming situation, a common response to it is to quit. I quit. It means that although our situations could be different than that of Arjuna, I hope you agree. Some of you I can see in the mirror, you can raise your hand if you agree with this point. It means although our situation could be different than that of Arjuna, but when we are faced with crisis, our response is also same like that of Arjuna, that is to quit. I cannot handle it. How many of us have ever said this? I give up now. Enough is enough. I cannot handle it. And that is what Arjuna's response here. However, at the end of Bhagavad Gita, the situation for Arjuna, in terms of the situation, did not change. His relatives and dear ones were still standing against him, but his response changed. A very important point. The situation will not change for us after you understand the message of Bhagavad Gita. Message of Bhagavad Gita, of wisdom of Bhagavad Gita, will change your response, will give you the ability to make the right choices and right responses. Similarly, the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita can change our response to an overwhelming situation and help us win the battle of life. Do remember that we may not be faced with overwhelming situation now, but we can meet with such existential crisis at any time. Some of you might have experienced when COVID was declared as pandemic. Some of you who may know others who got admitted to hospital, it was an existential crisis. They were not sure they're going to live or die. How we deal with it determines where we end up tomorrow. If Arjuna would have said no, walked away from the war, then he would have been called as coward, would have been called as an eunuch like that. But because Arjuna decided to follow Krishna's instruction, Arjuna is glorified even 5,000 years later. Lastly, how we conduct ourselves today determines how we deal with the challenging situations that we'll face, anyways we'll face in the future. In other words, our destiny is created by the decisions that we make in the present. And message of Bhagavad Gita prepares us for it. And with this, we conclude chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita. When we meet tomorrow, we'll be discussing second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is the biggest chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So tomorrow I will be facing an existential crisis myself. And my crisis would be, how do I sum up the whole discussion in 1 hour? So I'm upfront confessing it. I'll see if I can do it or not. If I can, okay, great. Congratulations. If not, then I will extend my existential crisis next weekend. We'll have 2 sessions, but we'll try to do it. And we'll see how Krishna refutes all these arguments given by Arjuna to quit and encourages him to see these difficult situations, not from material vision, but from spiritual vision. And to conclude, we have this final trivia for all of you. And the first trivia, let me just pull out the poll here. Gaurav Prabhu, can you handle that? So the first question here, do you feel Arjuna is right to retreat from battle out of compassion for his family members? This should be the last poll, Gaurav Prabhu. Okay,
Yes,
I can
Prabhu.
see that. I launch. Yes, so you have it in front of you. So what do you think? Do you feel Arjuna is right to retreat from battle out of compassion for his family members? Yes or no? Of course, I have not spoken anything or much about this compassion. We just introduced the problem statement today. We'll discuss tomorrow. But whatever you have heard today, whatever you have understood, let's see what you think about it. So, Gaurav, you can handle it. And lastly, this is not a poll. This is a question which you can think about and you can write to me I'm there on the group. If you were in Arjuna's position, what would you do? So great. So most of you say no, Arjuna is not correct for his compassion. And still 23 or some 32% people say yes, his compassion was right. Ahimsa is paro dharma. Non-violence is the greatest dharma. Well, that's what Krishna also said, no doubt about it. Finally, so if you're in Arjuna's position, what would you do? What you would have done? Just like what Arjuna was in situation, would you have listened to Krishna, or you would have walked away thinking that, well, my dear sir, I've made a decision. I'm not doing it. I'm going away. I don't care what you say. All right. Thank you, Krishna, for all your support and all this friendship for last 70 years. I'm going away. Hare Krishna. We would have done that, or you would have heard what Krishna wanted you to do that. With that, we conclude for today. Tomorrow, when we meet, Krishna willing, hopefully all of us will get to meet tomorrow again. We'll discuss chapter 2, or contents of Gita summarized. With that, we thank you all for your kind attention. This is my email address. If any one of you have any queries, or else I'm available on WhatsApp. We can discuss if you have any questions. And we conclude our discussion for today here. Any questions? Our host can manage now. If anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Prabhu. So the chat is on. So if anyone has any query that they can post. Prabhuji, do we have time for a couple of questions, or we do take it offline?
Sorry, it's already a little late. I went 10 minutes ahead. So we can have this way. If in case anyone is in hurry, they're more than welcome to quit. However, I can still be there for 5-10 minutes. If it helps to answer and to connect with the audience.
Your voice again distorted.
Hare Krishna. Is it good?
Yes.
So I was saying I can be available for some more time if it helps me to connect with the audience and help them understand the subject more. So my request would be, if you wish, you can switch on your camera, raise your hand, and Gaurav can call upon you, give you the right to unmute and speak up. Or else you can type in your question in the chat box, and then our host Gaurav and Vishnu can select the questions and can read out for you. Harshamutha, please repeat what is Bhagwan according to Vishnu Puran. I'll tell you tomorrow again. Don't worry. Tomorrow Bhagwan Uvacha will come. Okay. Gaurav, back to you. You can manage it now.
Yes, Prabhu. I'm just checking the chat.
Or anyone has a raise of hand in there when the video is on. I see Vinayak Gautam.
Yeah. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandvat Pranam.
Who is speaking?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Myself is Kanakanga Chaitanya Das.
Yeah, Prabhu, yes. If you can, right. Your video is also on. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for such an enlightening class you have given. I have two questions, Prabhuji, which I want to clear. That we know that Dhritarashtra heard the whole Bhagavad-Gita through Sanjaya in 18 days, but he couldn't become a devotee after hearing Bhagavad-Gita. And the second question, I just want to know that Lord was
can we go question? Can we go question by question? It'll help me to answer that.
Okay.
So your question is, even after hearing the whole Bhagavad-Gita, Dhritarashtra could not become a devotee. What does it mean? Yes, a very important point. So Prabhupada answers this question right in the introduction of Bhagavad-Gita, where he says Bhagavad-Gita is meant for devotees of the Lord. If unless person understands Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he cannot understand the message of Bhagavad-Gita. And the same point we were discussing, elaborating in our Mahabharata discussion, and I believe I briefly touched upon this discussion also. Krishna says, Bhakto si me sakha cheti, Arjuna, you are my devotee and you are my friend. I'm revealing the secret to you. Ye yatha ma prapadante tam sateva bhajamiham. As you surrender unto me, I reveal to you. And in the end, this is 4th chapter, in the end, 18th chapter, Sarva dharman parityaja, mamekam sharanam raja. So, this message is revealed to the degree or to the level of our surrender, to the level of our faith. When it comes to Dhritarashtra, he was very envious because of his deep-rooted material desires. And envy, anger, becomes a bottleneck for us to understand Krishna. I'll give you one simple example and we'll go to your second question. In Krishna Leela, Shamantaka Mani pastime, if you all have heard of that, What had happened with our Jambavan? A pure devotee of Lord Ram, a son of Brahma. When he came in front of Krishna, he could not understand Krishna. He saw Krishna as an enemy. That Jambavan, who was the wisest of all the monkeys, that Jambavan who saved the life of Lakshman by telling Hanuman how to get Jari Booty. Why? Acharya has explained in 10th chapter, in 10th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, when this reference comes, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Jiva Goswami also explains, because Jambavan, that point of time, was afflicted by anger. Now, anger is a younger brother of Kama. Kama Esha Krodha, Esha Rajoguna. So when we are afflicted by this Kama, Krodha, what is that? Kama, Krodha, Lobh, Moha, Matsarya, then Krishna gets hidden behind his energies. We cannot see Krishna. And that Jambavan was attached to that money because he wanted his son to play with that. So he thought somebody has come who wanted to rob my son of this money. I'm going to kill him, because that anger, his intelligence was covered over. So as long as a person is envious, he cannot understand Krishna. And when you read ahead, that person, such people say, "Kya hai? Bhagwan Shri Krishna kitna glorify karte hain apne bare mein?" I can tell you, I can make a candid confession here. When I started reading Bhagavad-Gita for the first time, after reading few pages, my head began to reel. I said, why Prabhupada is saying every line, surrender to Krishna? I got it, man. Come on, give me a break. Because the envy was very much there. But when you take to the process of bhakti, when you take to the association of devotees, when you chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra, when you eat Krishna Prasadam, purification begins. Cheto Darpana Marjana. Then our surrender process begins. That's the whole thing. Dhritarashtra had enough of association. Probably he didn't got prasadam, maybe. I don't know. So his heart was never purified. And of course, he never chanted Hare Krishna Mahamantra. I'm just joking on that. Anyways, yes, what's the second question?
Prabhuji, that sometimes we see that Duryodhana was a son of Dhritarashtra, and Dhritarashtra was encouraging his son to win this kingdom. So if we see the same condition in our present situation, sometimes there are very nice devotees, but the parents are wrong. Devotees are good, but the parents are wrong, and the suffering is there. So how one can understand in this situation that Dhritarashtra was encouraging his wrong son to get the kingdom, which was completely wrong. But the devotees, those are practicing, the children are good, but their parents are not encouraging them. So how we can understand this?
Very, very brilliant question. Thank you. Very nice question. Dhritarashtra represents wrong motivations, and Duryodhana represents wrong actions.
Yes.
So motivation, which means, let's say the parents could be wrong, but ultimately action, what we perform, we are accounted for that. So as being a parent, as being a child, where in case our parents may be forcing us for sense gratification, eat meat, drink liquor, sometimes some families have this culture. So they may be like Dhritarashtra, the wrong motivation, but our action should not be like that, because we are accountable for that. So it's a dynamic balance that we need to bring out. It's a tension, it's a dynamic tension between dharma and adharma, where dharma exists within the same family now, where a family is more adharmically aligned and kids want to follow, practice dharma. It's a tension. But again, to the degree we understand the Vedic wisdom, to the degree we take shelter of superiors and seniors and understand Krishna conscious philosophy, we'll get the wisdom, the much needed strength and the intelligence how to deal with this crisis. Because just like a gold, before we get the final product, it has to go through a lot of burning. We have to go through some purification. And ultimately, Krishna is the controller. So Krishna arranges different agents of purification in our lives. In this case, the agent could be parents. But for you and my, the agents could be somebody else. For me, it could be a fellow brahmachari also. For you, it could be your son, maybe your wife, or maybe your neighbors. But we all have somebody who's going to always create a friction in our life. So yes, time, place, circumstances, challenges differ, but challenges are there. So as our understanding increases and as our shraddha and faith in association with devotees improves, so we can take their guidance and deal with these challenges. But challenges are not to disrupt our spiritual life. Challenges are very healthy. Imagine, Prabhu, if you have no challenge in your spiritual life and material life, imagine all good. Would you be able to practice Krishna consciousness that sincerely, although we wish it could be, but it doesn't happen? When life is all comfortable, all good, we don't take chanting so seriously. We don't take reading. Oh, what is there? Everything is fine. But when there are crises, then we should see the quality of chanting. Imagine you're flying in a plane and suddenly the plane begins to shake. The quality of chanting at that point in time, the quality of chanting that you had today morning would be too different. Yes or no? So that's the point. So I guess we should not be afraid of the crisis and challenges. We should see as an opportunity to take more shelter of the Lord, to take more shelter of the process. That's the reason Mother Kunti said, Vipata Santutha Shashvat Tatra Tatra Jagaduru. Let me have more calamities. And to understand that, we require maturity. That's the point. I hope I answered.
Sorry, Prabhuji. If this situation we are facing in our life, and we want to, at the same time, we want to make our family Krishna conscious, our brothers Krishna conscious, our parents Krishna conscious, our children Krishna conscious, but the situation is not allowing us, or they are not understanding God, but it is affecting our sadhana. So being a devotee in that situation, what one should has to do? He has to leave them.
Give up your controllership mentality. Because of the fault here is, the fault line is, I want to make them. I want to make them. Who are we to make anyone? We ourselves are not able to become properly situated Krishna conscious devotees. So you, as a father, as a son, brother, in your relationship, you have a responsibility, you can act. Now, to the degree you act in a detached manner, to that degree you will have a peaceful spiritual life. But to the degree you have a controllership mentality, to that degree you will suffer.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
That's a point to be focused on. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Where are you from?
I'm from Kuwait, Prabhuji.
Okay, thank you. Kana Kanga Chaitanya Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Gaurav?
Hare Krishna. Yes, Vinayak Prabhu, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. In the 10 to 12 to 20 this thing poems, it is said that it is transcendental. The Panchajanya and all these things. Panchajanya is one of the eternal servant of the Lord. That is there. But remaining Devadattam, Poundrakam and all these things is kept transcendental. Why? Because it is used in the service of Lord. That's why it is transcendental. Or they are themselves some personalities?
Well, that's not the case, that they are not been described anywhere as personality, but I can just quickly verify if, because you are referring that all the conches are being described as transcendental. I'll just read out the exact translation. Lord Krishna, this is first chapter, 15th verse. Lord Krishna blew his conch called Panchajanya, Arjuna blew his Devadatta, and so forth. And Bhima blew his terrific conch shell called Pondra. Their being transcendental is not given even in Sanskrit verse, not even English translation. So I'm not sure where exactly, what reference are you quoting here, that the conches have been described as transcendental.
No. In the this thing, in your presentation also, it has came like transcendental or something. Even Prabhupada writes it as a transcendental in the this thing purport.
So that transcendental would refer to Lord Shri Krishna's, Panchajanya in that case, but not for the case of Pandavas in that way. Again, I'll have to clearly see the reference, what you're indicating to. If in case it is described for Pandavas, that we can further discuss. But for Lord Shri Krishna, yes, Lord Shri Krishna.
For Lord Shri Krishna, it is there.
Yes, Lord Shri Krishna.
But one more thing, Prabhuji, for suppose you see Lord Balrama's weapons like Sunanda and Hala.
Transcendental.
All are having names. They're all transcendental. But the same, while Bhishmadev is blowing his conch shell doesn't have any name.
No, Bhishma's conch also has a name. Everything had a name then. It doesn't mean the name is there, so it becomes transcendental.
No.
See, Krishna, Balram, Krishna and Balram may not be mentioned here, but Mahabharata describes it. Of course, what all Sanjay will speak here, Vyasa will write here, but Mahabharata describes it. See, even their swords had a name. Arjuna had a bow by the name of Gandiva.
No, but Gandiva is also described as a transcendental. Why? Because Gandiva is not a
Gandiva is given by, was a celestial weapon, was not an ordinary weapon. In that context, could have been described as transcendental. But as far as these things, possessions, they were also had names because they had a great utility. See, I'll tell you what is Vedic culture, and then we move on to next question to help you understand. Vedic culture is all about personalism. Like I have this phone. And today the culture is people can kick this phone with their feet. They can keep it anywhere. But no, our Vedic Sanskriti teaches about respecting each and everything. So there is a respect. There's a culture of respect. Now Arjuna's bow, Gandiva bow, is his livelihood. That's what through that he would be able to maintain law and order. So that has a name. That means respect. That is the meaning of cultural respect here, and not in today's time we have that. All right.
I have one more question, Prabhu. Sorry to take your time. I usually wonder why, suppose you have just, when you read many stories of the pastimes of Lord, you come across many Rakshasas and all these things. You see, just like Dhritarashtra, what you explained. When he has taken birth, he has been given the name Dhritarashtra.
No. That wasn't like that. Duryodhan's name was not Duryodhan. His name was
Duryodhan's name is Suyodhan, I know. But Dhritarashtra's name is Dhritarashtra only, right from the birth. So how they have determined that Dhritarashtra will become like this, and this is the name of Dhritarashtra.
So there is, correct. I got your question. There are called as Samskaras. Garbhodham Samskara, and there is another Samskara called as Jaita Dharma. What is a Jaita Dharma? When a child is born, a Pandit, a Brahmana is called, and his astrological chart is prepared. And according to the astrological chart, the Brahmanas had the ability to clearly foresee in the future what would be the qualities and talents of this person. Based on that, a Brahmana would recommend a name for the child.
Yes, Prabhuji, then they should have discarded the child there itself.
Yeah, fantastic. Good. You can give that advice to the Dhritarashtra parents. You are saying discard as if it is so easy. What is a piece of a paper you can throw it off?
No, generally, Bharata Maharaj.
Vidura told Dhritarashtra, Duryodhan is born to cause destruction. There are all bad omens. Dhritarashtra could not give up. So let's not undermine the practicality of material attachments.
But Bharata Maharaj has given kingdom not to his sons, but to one Brahmana. His sons are proven incapable. So he has
that's going out of subject now. We'll come back to Bhagavad-Gita, what's going on.
Okay.
If you have this question, we can always take in the review session that we have on Thursday. Okay, so let's come back to chapter 1 because we have other problem. Thank you, Vinayak. Where are you from?
Okay. I am from Pune, Prabhu.
Okay, great. Got somebody else?
Hare Krishna. Anyone else? I have seen earlier Dipali Mataji wanted to ask. Okay. Mataji, you can unmute now.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yes, please.
Just mentioned during your lecture that Dhritarashtra was selfish because he was ready to destroy everything for the sake of his personal greed. But then if you look at the Pandava side, they were also equally greedy. And if not greedy, they also led to the war because of their revenge, because they wanted to take the revenge. If they were not that revengeful, they could have gone for war earlier also, but they initiated this war only after the Draupadi Chirharan. So somehow their intentions were also malicious.
Okay, I understood your question up to the last point. Then you brought the Draupadi Chirharan, now which was definitely a cause for a war. And scriptures, it is clearly mentioned: if somebody insults your wife, molests your wife, somebody burns your house, somebody steals your property, that person should be killed. So if Pandavas fought with the Kauravas because Draupadi was insulted, they were totally certified according to scriptures. They cannot be called as selfish, they cannot be called as revengeful, and they would not incur sin. So that's the first point. So I would say the question got distracted until you brought Draupadi to picture. Let's go back a little bit in the back. Let's take Draupadi case out of it. So your point is, yes, Pandavas fought because of revenge. So I'll invite you for our Mahabharata sessions. Right now, we started the book 5, Udyog Parva. Udyog Parva is just before the Mahabharata war begins. Bhishma Parva is the next book. Today and tomorrow, today I started the introduction. Tomorrow we'll be discussing more about it. When you study Mahabharata, Udyog Parva, I am not speaking, I am not writing, Vyasdeva described where this Bhagavad-Gita comes. When you study it, you'll get very clearly, you'll know clearly who was responsible. If Pandavas really had revengeful attitude. Now, this understanding that we have, it could be partly because of what we see in the TVs or what we read from some of the articles and magazines and whatnot. And people write everything, even if they have not studied Mahabharata in details. Anyways, who has the time to read 1 lakh verses of Vyasdev? But yes, I do have a time to comment anything I want to do. I can make any comment on Twitter and whatnot and say I'm a very learned person. Well, that's not the case. If you read Udyog Parva, makes it very clear. It was only Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra who desired to have a war. Parshuram, Lord Shri Krishna, Narada Muni, Vyasa, you name a sage. Bhishma, Drona, Kripacharya, Sanjaya, Vidura, everyone told Dhritarashtra, you are wrong. Pandavas are right. So please tell me, can we be more correct than these personalities when they blame Dhritarashtra to be wrong? You are responsible for leading everyone to this fratricidal war. And what did the Yudhishthira Maharaj said at the end? I am fine even if you give me 5 villages. Does it indicate revengeful attitude? And then Krishna personally went as a peace messenger. This does not indicate any revengeful attitude. Vyasadeva doesn't describe, Lord Shri Krishna doesn't speak like this for Pandavas. Lord Krishna glorifies the character of Yudhishthira Maharaj. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to know the details, join the Mahabharata session to get the history, what actually has. But that's a picture. At least you know of the 5 villages incident. So that at least should satisfy you that can never be a revengeful attitude. All right. Where are you from, Dipali?
I'm from Pune only.
Okay, thank you. Karaprabhu, anything else?
Thank you. We have a couple of more hands. Bhavesh Prabhu, you want to ask some questions? You can unmute yourself now.
Prabhuji, can we have the sessions in Hindi?
Fantastic. I'll revert back to the host to decide. Whatever they say, I'll do it. Because it's very, very difficult for me to make this decision because sometimes people ask for Hindi and then eventually the Hindi audience disappears and the only English audience remains. That's what happened with Mahabharata sessions because people asked me, I started with Hindi. By the time we reached 25 sessions, very few Hindi audience remained and new English audience joined in and they started asking for English. So now from last weekend, we started Mahabharata in English. So your question is valid. We can ask this question in the whole form, the forum. But because we had announced it in English, I believe everyone would like to have it in English now.
Sure.
We are announcing the forum now. Yes.
Okay. Hello, it's Ritika Mataji. You wanted to ask a question? Just a second. Now you can unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Can you please make your video on?
And just please allow me 1 second. Give me 1 quick second.
Ritika Mataji, can you switch on your camera so that we know we can see you?
Just a second, Prabhuji. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Audible?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah,
yes, Mataji.
Please go ahead.
Yes, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, the acronym.
Mataji, your camera again goes off.
Now is it visible,
Right.
Prabhuji?
Yes, thank you.
Prabhuji, the third acronym, uncertainty, that was from Shloka 21 to 27. And the key point was Lord is an intimate servant of his devotees. What is uncertainty here, Prabhuji?
Okay, the subject matter of uncertainty is where Arjuna asked Lord Shri Krishna to drive his chariot in front of the army. And that led to the uncertainty in the mind of Arjuna. Okay? And the lesson and the key theme which is brought out in here is about how Krishna acted as a servant of his devotee. So these are 2 parallel lines going on.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. One is the actual incident, and one is a background story connected to it.
Yes. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Right. I think it's quite late now, but we have one last question from Pran Priya Radhika Mataji. Mataji, you can unmute yourself now
Hare Krishna,
and,
Prabhuji.
and switch on your camera also.
Yeah, one second.
Right. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I just wanted to ask the question regarding that Prabhuji asked, and it was a very wonderful session.
Thank you. Thank you.
Prabhuji, I've done Bhagavad-Gita and Satyavati Mataji, and this was a truly enlightening session with a very different perspective. And Prabhuji, I wanted to ask that Prabhuji asks whether you want your family to follow Krishna consciousness. But even I am alone in my family, and I'm not too pushy about pushing them into Krishna consciousness. Is that all right?
Well, as I said that time also, as a family member, you have certain responsibility and obligation towards them, but you can act in a detached manner, knowing that you can perform your duty, but the result is not in your hand.
Yeah,
the
result agreed with Prabhuji. Yeah.
So you can do your duty, and if you do it duty in a detached manner, only then you can be happy. Otherwise, it will become very difficult.
No, Prabhuji, what I meant is, if I'm not pushy, is it wrong? And if I'm pushy, am I doing the 9th aparad?
So again, my answer would be, do things as needed according to time, place, circumstance. Because what is your pushiness? I don't know.
No, means if they're not into it, and I just go on behind, I'm behind their life. Nahi, Krishna consciousness banna hi hai, jab karna hi hai.
You will end up frustrating yourself, because nobody becomes Krishna conscious like that. So if that's the case, don't do it. Create a culture and environment where they feel inspired and they see that there is a positive change in you. And the change in you is because of Krishna consciousness. As it is said, action speaks more louder than words. They will be inspired sooner or later, for sure. All right?
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Gaurav, is too late.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, I'll not take any more questions. And if anyone has any question, then you can message me or into the group. We can take that separately. And the recording of this. Yes, Prabhu.
Go ahead, finish up.
Yeah, I'm just saying that, okay, the recording of this session will be there in the YouTube. So if you wanted to refer, you can go to the YouTube channel, subscribe that, and you can revisit the recording of the session.
And Karpu, are there any questions on the chat box? In that case, we can address it tomorrow or later on. Or maybe we can save the chat and we can have that during the Thursday review session. So everyone's questions are addressed.
Yes, I believe all of them are already done. But still, I'll go through it because many of the questions devotees have asked through the audio itself. So,
okay, great.
So thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time, and thank you, Prabhuji. So we'll meet tomorrow.
Hare Krishna.